So I'd like to thank you all for coming. I know it's a really busy time of semester, and I'd just like to quickly remind you of upcoming presentations, including the one at 12:30 today by Saskia Stinson and Connie Alger, and the one next week by Larry Isles. Larry is speaking on student evaluation of experiential experiences, best practices, and there is a host of subsequent presentations going right through to December 13th. Felicia Gerard here, the co-op student for the center, has done a wonderful job of advertising. And I was looking up information on one of the presenters today, and I typed in the presenter's name, and like the first 10 hits were related to this series. So that's a really good indication of Felicia's expertise. So I'd like to, I think probably everyone here knows Robin very well, but I'd like to just give a little bit of background on the presenters. Robin was involved in the Cura, and she's a current member of the TRU Place group, which isn't a surprise to many, if not all of you. And she did her graduate work at the University of Calgary, and she's kept up collaborations there. So please join me in welcoming Robin.
Great. Thanks for coming, you guys. Really appreciate it. So for today, I'm going to go through this quite quickly so that we can have that time that Jenny promised for some questions. And so this is based on some coursework that I've done in terms of trying to bring tourism curriculum and making connections to community. And to begin with, I've been very much influenced by the pedagogy of the Place group that I've been a member of for a couple of years now. And so as a member of this group, I'm a newcomer, and, but it consists of 10 faculty members from across a variety of disciplines, and some of them are here today. And we came together as a learning community to assess whether a common place-based assignment could deepen student engagement with places where we live and study. And so the assignment that we chose as a group was called Postcards from Home, and in which students would use this particular medium to connect theoretical course content to place. So this particular course that I decided to use the postcard in was called Community and Cultural Issues in Tourism. It's a third-year course in our degree program, and the inspiration really came to me from what I had done is I already had a walking tour as an assignment, and then when I joined the group, I needed to attach a postcard somehow to this assignment that I already had going. And so I changed the assignment in the course, and I had students create this half-hour walking tour as a way to engage travelers and locals in the landscape that we visit and occupy. And I was already really working with the idea of place and how we engage in the landscape. And so the other piece that I had that gave me inspiration for the walking tour as well is that I volunteered for a short time with the business development group downtown. They're the ambassadors that walk around and help people out. And they had done a walking tour, and they're all students that are there. And it was for the Rocky Mountaineer rail guests that on one evening, it was Thursdays at 7 o'clock. And so I joined the students and looked at how they were doing the tour, and it was a 1-hour tour. And I thought to myself, you know, here I am in the tourism department, we've got tourism students. Why aren't tourism students getting engaged in creating half-hour walking tours for Rocky Mountaineer or for the local people? So this is the course that I decided that I would try to make that connection to. And then, come on in, Elizabeth. So I was inspired by that, but I was also inspired by Lucy Lepard, and in this tourism context, I liked her observation that travel is the only context in which people ever look around. And if we spent half the energy looking at our own neighborhoods, we'd probably learn twice as much. So it really resonated with me about how much, even as a local, we can be tourists in our own places. Come on in, Lynn. That's okay. Thanks for coming, and Elizabeth too. So the assignment that I created was sort of broken down like this. So the 10% went to a postcard, and the 15% went to the interpretive walking tour. And then I had students write a reflection based on their experiences of the tour and putting it together. So they were required to create this single postcard, and both the interpretive tour and the postcard sort of acted as agents of place making, and that they both sort of inscribe narratives onto the landscape. And the visual and written images of the landscape also allowed the students some flexibility to engage with present course material, which was really one of the goals, and do it in a creative fashion or a creative way. And in addition to providing that theoretical context or connection to place, I wanted to see how the assignment could also engage international and domestic students in Kamloops community, and because that's where they're living and that's where they're working, so it made sense. So I was challenged by this because I thought, okay, here I am asking them to do this postcard, and never done something like this before, and this is something that we had dialogue with the place group. How do we assign grades to something that is really this creative? So I came up with a grading rubric, and I borrowed this from Nancy Flood, and she had developed it already, and then I thought, well, maybe I could use it and adapt it for what I was trying to do. And I really like this piece here. Is your postcard interesting, and did you go the extra mile? Because it gave me some wiggle room and to be able to assign maybe some extra grades and to the particular student. So having this marking rubric, I think, really helped. So I'm going to just sort of give you an overview of some of the postcards and some of the tours that the students came up with. So this was a group of students that decided that they were going to feature certain places in Kamloops that they felt that they would like locals to visit and also tourists. So theirs was a walking tour, and they called it Community and Cultural Tour. So it started at the Kamloops Art Gallery, and then it went down Victoria Street and featured a few places along the way. And the idea was to take people in and then hope that they would actually come back to those sites and those places. And particularly the Art We Are as well, because it's got so many local artisans and things. They wanted to connect people to that. But of course it finished off at the Noble Pig. So that was a good place to finish off. Another group decided that they were going to do a walking tour of some of the sport facilities in the downtown area. And they chose the theme of Kamloops as being Canada's tournament capital. And the interesting connection here with experiential learning and connection to place is how this assignment allowed them to connect with people in the community. So, you know, one of the recreational directors with the city of Kamloops was really interested in what the students were doing. And the students had contacted him to say, okay, you know, if we take people to the arena, or if we go here, and they wanted to have in the curling club, and just to get some history of the significance of those sporting activities to Kamloops. And so he was really intrigued by their tour and actually followed up and wanted them to do the tour after the semester or for the next year. Because this is offered in the fall, it was sort of an ideal time of year for the students to get out there and explore. So another group decided that they were going to take a look at Thompson Rivers University. And it was a group of international students, and they started their tour at the International Building, and they had all of these black and white photos of what the campus used to look like. And so they sort of had this historical narrative that they ran through and said, you know, these buildings came about because of these faculties, or this is what the TRU looked like in the past. And then we ended up finishing up over here in the House of Learning down in the Brown Center. And so it was a really interesting piece, because here the students are on campus and yet they may not even connect to the campus without having that little bit of an insight. So one of the next ones was Kamloops Hidden Art Project. And so they wanted to do a tour of the murals and the artwork, outdoor artwork downtown in some of the back alleys. So these are the two students sitting here, or standing here and looking at one of the murals. I think it was done by Ken, I can't remember his name. He painted our house too. He didn't do a mural in our house, but he's a painter. And so this is one of this. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to appeal to both the locals and the tourists. So on the back of their postcard, the narrative is basically the Earth without Earth. That was really good. So I know that the caption is quite small here and you may not be able to read it. But for locals, they tried targeting both the locals and tourists. So for the locals, the caption was get transported into a fantasy world so visually amazing and wonder why you hadn't seen it before. And then for the tourists, the line was, we'll take you to hot spots that the locals treasure. No wonder it's Kamloops' best kept secret. And I think I forgot to mention this, this is kind of key. The idea behind the postcards were that they could actually take the postcards up to the visitor center so that when tourists came into town, they would actually be able to pick up these postcards and say, oh, there's a walking tour that we could maybe go and do. And so then it was supposed to have the times and the locations and things. And some of the students met those requirements and some of them didn't, but that's okay. And so this was the piece that would connect their work to actually tourists visiting. So this next one, and this one really engaged Andrew Yarmy. And of course, because the students went down to the Kamloops Museum and Archives, and you know, Tina, when you and I were talking about that, you know, students accessing archives and it being actually primary data. You know, who would have thought that that's primary data and not secondary data? But they had such a great experience down at the museum and archives, working with the archivists, and down there and looking at old, you know, newspaper articles and just having that access to the history. And so this group's intention was proposing the idea of an interpretive walk that underlines specific women's groups in Kamloops that actually made a difference. And they started their tour in the west end of the city, and it was a place where they tried to describe it as much more than just buildings on the landscape. Rather, it's a place where fundamental societal changes took place, and where women broke social and sort of economic barriers, and Kamloops kind of transformed itself into this vibrant community based on women. And the women's groups that they featured in this were the Afternoon Auxiliary Royal Inland Hospital, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Red Cross, and how these women came together to help out all walks of life and all denominations during the war years, basically. And so that was their theme. So the postcard that you have here is the one that they presented in class. And part of the exercise in class was to introduce the postcard, then introduce your walking tour, and then go back and revisit the postcard to see if the students felt that your postcard reflected the tour. And so what happened is that half the students were like, oh yeah, that's a great postcard, I would pick it up, you know, if I was a tourist coming through and I saw it. And then the other ones thought, well, maybe you should tone it down. So what they did is that they got two, and then this one was their toned down version, and this is the other one. So I thought that that was kind of an interesting approach. And it was one of the ones that actually had all of these sort of things with regard to the actual tour, where it is, the times, and the entry. And then on the back of the postcard, they had even more information about it. And they put the little teacups on the bottom, and then of course the photo credit for where that photo actually came from. So this particular one, I think, is the one that really resonates with me in terms of connecting international students to Kamloops and to the campus. And it was really unexpected in terms of being rewarding in the connection to place, but also for experiential learning as well. And these were 3 students from China, and they decided to create a walking tour that included the history of the Chinese railway workers that were, you know, so much a part of the Canadian history in the building of the railway. And they actually created a video of the walking tour. So they went downtown and they walked along the tracks, and then they'd come across some of the trains that were down there, and then they'd speak about it. And their actual videoing techniques weren't that great because the wind was blowing at the time, and the wind's coming through the mic, and it depends on which position they were in. And so this year for the walking tour, I've had them go to IT services to be able to get some training, because it's such good work. I just hated to have that skill lost, right? Or they didn't have the skill to have that important message lost. But what was most rewarding was their discovery that some of the Chinese rail workers were actually from their hometown back in China. And so, you know, for them to stand up there and talk about this and then know that their relatives were also connected to this place, and it sort of was revealing to them, and to me too. It really touched me. So for the students, and I've borrowed this from the place group and who in the publications and things, but I just totally love this picture and what place studies actually do, and all those layers of meaning that are right below our feet. And I've decided to carry on with this particular project this year. I'm not doing the postcard, but the students are actually doing their walking tours. And I had Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tour come into the classroom and talk about the demographics and the travelers that are coming through. And, and I've drawn on a researcher in tourism, a seminal researcher, Ralph, in 1976. He basically stated that, tourists are the most unlikely group of people to actually engage in community because they don't stay long enough. And they go through with this sort of consumptive attitude, and they like things that are sort of Disneyfied and the whole bit. So I thought to myself, okay, well, rather than arguing with Ralph and taking a position, what if I posed that question to the students and said, how can tourism and interpretive walks perhaps fill that gap and allows people to connect to the places where they're visiting? And so this year, with the Rocky Mountaineer Rail Tour group coming into the class, the students were given the option of targeting Rocky Mountaineer guests, or they could target locals, or they could target other tourists as well. So I have another group that's doing an art walk, an outdoor art walk, and they've connected, and this is the connection piece that I love to community. They've connected with the art gallery downtown, Hampton Gallery downtown, and talk to the owners there about their idea. And the owners are thinking, well, this would be a really great tour, and then the Rocky Mountaineer people could come in and they could, maybe we could do a glass of wine or something, and they could look at the artwork, and we could always package up the artwork if they wanted to buy something and send it back to their home country. So that's one piece. I do have another group of Chinese students that are doing the history of the graveyard, the Chinese graveyard. And they've connected with the woman that is part of the Chinese association here. So they're really excited about going and being able to make that connection. And I've got other students that are connecting all around in terms of how to place this assignment within the community and make those arrangements. So I think that's sort of where I'm going to leave it, and actually welcome any questions. What did I do for time? Well, lots.
I'm amazed by this. I think it's just so neat. It just seems like so much fun for the students, as well as, discovering and so on. I'm interested in the process. How did they decide on the tours? Was there class time given for that? All of those sorts of logistics. Could you talk about that a bit, Robin?
That's an awesome question. Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, the process. Okay, so when I first introduced it to them, and last year I had them go into their own groups. I had them choose their own groups. Mm-hmm. Fortunately for me, it worked out okay, but now, this year, I'm actually working with Kyra, and we're taking a completely different approach. And we're just in the process of ethics review to use this particular course for how we set it up. This year, what we did is we had Kyra come into the classroom and talk about group work and the importance of everybody contributing to the group. So when Kyra left, then what I did is I had the students give me a piece of paper, 2 pieces of paper. On one piece of paper, I wanted them to write down what are your most important aspects that you bring, or skills that you bring personally to a group. And I had them write down 2 things. Then I had them write on the other piece of paper, what are the skills that you're looking for in the group work that other members bring, that maybe you don't have those skills. So then they handed me all these pieces of paper, and I said also, if there's somebody else in the class that you would like to work with, put their name down as well on this piece of paper. And I said 2 to 3 people max. I don't want to see a list of 5. I just want 2 or 3 people. So then they gave me that. So then I thought, okay, I'm going home now, and I'm going to have to weed through this, because the next piece is, I told them, I'm going to form the groups based on what you have told me. And so I sat there out on my back porch, my back patio, and I had my glass of wine, and I had these papers all over the place. I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to match these students up? And so I did. I used it based on the skills that they wanted to see in the groups. I based it on whether they had other preferences to work with certain students. and ones that I thought would be suitable to bring that group together. And so I came back the next day of class and I said, okay, these are your groups. And I have 10 groups. Well, the class is 38 students. So I think I've got about 10 groups, or maybe 8. They're in groups of 4 to 5. I even did it larger because class time to actually present tours, right, eats into a lot of the course. And so I came back, and one of the groups of students said to me, do you know, before this exercise, I hated group work. I don't want any group work. And so she said, did you purposely put us all together because we all speak German, even though we're from different countries? And I'm like, no, I had no idea. And so it was, one student was from Switzerland, another one's Canadian, another one's this. And she said, most of us in the group actually are multilingual. We could go back and forth between a couple of languages. Did you have any idea? And I went, no, I had no idea before this happened. So there's some really cool dynamics that are actually coming out of the process piece that you asked about. I also had them write up a team charter that says basically these are the things that we want to see, like if somebody's late, you know, how are we going to deal with it? Some of them put down, oh, you have to bring Tim Hortons donuts. You know, how are you going to deal with texting? How are you going to deal with all of these things, right? And particularly from an intercultural communications perspective, because some of the readings in the course, we focused in on the significance of that and being able to communicate. Another group is actually my group of Chinese students. They had kind of paired up a couple of people that they wanted to work with, and so I thought to myself, okay, I'll put them together. And then other groups are completely across the board in terms of where the students come from. And I haven't had any complaints about it yet, and we'll see. So what I did is I changed the actual assessment, and I made this project 50% of their grade, which is risky when you think about it being group work and people coming into the classroom going, I hate group work, right? So what I did is I took 30% and I put 30% on the end product. So what is it that you guys are coming up with? The other 20% is actually on the process. So they get to reflect on the process. So 10% of that 20 is individual reflection. And Kyra and I have all these questions that actually will lead them through what I want them to answer. And then the other 10% is reflecting on the group process, and what they took away from the group process, what they would take into another group situation that they work in, what they learned from it. And then, of course, I wanted to come back to the idea of place. So I have them reflect on how this assignment helped them to understand course content. And yeah, I went that way. So it'll be interesting to see what the results are that Kyra and I end up with from this.
I'm just curious, I don't want to hog the question period, but do you give them time in class, like some time in class?
I have one class.
Right, yeah.
Just one. That's it. I might give them some more time today, actually, come to think of it.
I'll shut up now.
No, that's good. Thanks.
I have a trivial question, but it's just interesting because I do a lot of work with groups in my classes. Did you encourage set up any mechanism for the students to be able to peer evaluate each other's work or contribution to the group?
It's in the peer evaluation that they
Okay, so they
hand
do
in at the
peer
end.
evaluation.
Yeah,
That's great.
that's the piece that they do. And we have them write, and I gave them an example. I put it up there, actually in the rubric that I want them to use. You know, please give constructive feedback, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the comments that the students write in their peer evaluation and I'm going to share it with each member of the team. But I said, okay, so-and-so, you know, Jack brings a lot to the group, but perhaps could be more open-minded when suggestions are presented.
And does their peer evaluation actually affect the grade on the group work?
It will, yeah. Yeah, because they're going to evaluate those other partners, and those partners are going to evaluate them, and so that will affect 10% of their grade.
I think that's great. I think that gives that sense of accountability and investment in that group work, and that's been the turning point for me in changing groups.
Yeah.
The nature of group work in my classes.
Yeah, and it's
is
such
making the
a
students
challenge.
accountable inside of it. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. And it's the first time I've ever evaluated the process to say to the students, tell me what you thought of this process, as opposed to just assigning all the grades to their finished product and not even having a clue what they went through to get there. Yeah. And
I'm just curious why you took the postcard component out.
I thought it was too much. Yeah, I just thought, because I now got the process piece in there,
Yeah.
I just thought, okay,
One more thing.
it's
Yeah.
one more thing that I felt like I think the stress level of the students would rise was one more thing that they had to do on that assignment. I didn't want to.
Yeah, because
It's
I love what what they came up with for the postcards.
That's okay, we went through ethics review again, and I've included the postcards, and I have ethics approval for all the first-year students this year, so.
A lot of postcards.
I have a ton of postcards. Might be a couple of years before we actually get through them, but yeah, so those are there.
Another logistical question about the videography. How did it go? Have you done the training this semester yet?
Yeah, and they were really supportive. I actually called IT services and said, this is the project, this is what I'd love for my students to be able to do. And what equipment can they use? And the other piece here is that I got some students that are actually videoing their walk, and then they're going to present it in class. But I also have Wendy Mackenzie from nursing, who saw this. I did this presentation in Cape Breton at the Stilly conference, and she has offered to fund a student to actually put together vignettes from the student presentations. So we're going to have a whole bunch of vignettes of the students doing this, and my goal is to actually, and I've got a student in mind to actually come into the classroom, and we'll put this together, and I have in mind actually putting it on Shaw cable as a piece that connects the students to community. Yeah, so that's my goal, is to get exposure for what students are doing in the classroom. It's not just the classroom, it's their work in the community. I mean, that's my end result that I want. Keep my fingers crossed that it actually happens. Yeah, wow.
Given your success with this and what you've learned yourself and what you think the value is in for students, are you thinking about employing the same kind of strategies in any of your other classes?
Yes, actually, I am, totally. And hopefully next semester, Kyra and I would like to repeat it in the same course and just see what happens, because the more courses that you can do this in, the better. And then Kyra and I working together, we're thinking what we could do is come up with some tools that could be used and then take it outside of the tourism discipline as an experiment and move it into other disciplines. So then, so I think what we're going to do is try to present at the teaching practices colloquium and bring our results from this semester to that, and then hopefully have other disciplines engaged in trying the same thing, and then we can bring it together and see whether it happens. And this is also based on a lot of Kyra's research as well, and her doctoral dissertation, and some of the interviews she's done with students on various campuses. And one of her observations was that we talk about interculturalizing the classrooms, we talk about it, but when she interviewed the students say, yeah, you talk about it, but you don't give us an opportunity to do it. And so I thought, okay, well, let's see what happens when we give an opportunity for this sort of intercultural piece, working together and moving forward on projects and things, yeah. So it'd be really cool to do it further out than just my classes, definitely.
Robin, do you get the international students to reflect on what they've learned into, I'm thinking back to the railway workers and reflecting back on their own hometowns and their own culture and landscape. And do you get them to reflect that way with these questions that Kyra's come up with?
We haven't, I think there's some questions about that in their self-reflection. And course content piece, but I love the way that you put that, actually. I'd like to have that question in the next semester. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like to look at your material.
Yeah. No, I really like that, that piece. When I did it in the first year class, I didn't do the walking tour attached to the postcards, but in the first year class, I had them do that piece. And it was postcards from their home. and they had to tell me what was it that pulled on their heartstrings about home. And so last year I had, I can't remember, I had 20-some students. So this year I have them doing exactly the same thing, and it's a 2-page reflective piece that comes in with the postcard saying why they are connected to this place. What is it about it that matters to them? And so we'll see what comes out of that this year. So,
I'm curious about marking reflections. Like that's a big percentage of their grade is dependent on reflection. How do you mark quality of reflection?
That's, yeah, good. So there's 10% of this project, which I kept it, at 10%.
Okay, so there's a self-reflection and a reflection on group?
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes up to 20%.
Okay.
So it's their peer evaluations are 10, their self-reflection is 10.
Okay.
And that's the process piece. And so I have questions laid out that I want them to address in their reflection piece about the process and also about their connection to course content. So even things like, before you started this course, did you enjoy group work? After the course, after you've gone through this process, how do you feel about group work? And so there's kind of like before and afters, and then there's also about the actual course content. You know, did you find that this helped you? Did you, like, we're trying to get at, did you grow, or were you frustrated, or what were some of the feelings that came out of this?
Right, because I always encounter the problem with quality. So I can say, yeah, you answered it, but did you answer it? And how do you say, you answered that well, you didn't answer that well? Kind of like that dichotomy. And when you have cultural issues too, the reflection part, is it holistic, or are you, or reductionist? Like, to what level do you divide up?
Right.
Because I'm used to, in my assignments, you did. This equals 4, this equals 3, this equals 2 marks. And I started doing the reflection marking, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't really like that reflection. I thought it was weak, but to write out, like, so how?
I've actually told my students too, I said, I want quality here.
Yeah.
You'll be graded on quality. I want to see some depth to your thinking about this. And I gave them flexibility, and I said, if on some of these questions, you know, it didn't really resonate with you, but there's another question here or another piece that you really want to focus in on, I'm okay with that. So maybe if you just focus on 2 of the list of things here, and give me like half a page or something on each, that's okay. So yeah, I'm on the edge, and for sure.
I wonder if we could talk a bit about reflective writing at some point. Maybe Rob and Anne could talk first, though, and we'll come back to that.
Well, I was just going to say, because I've done the
point.
same thing where I've had students reflect and then I've had to assign a mark, and it's like, oh, because I always like to have something to hang on to. So if I had to justify that mark to someone, if someone fought me on it, I could say, here is exactly why I gave that mark.
Yeah.
And so this might sound weak, but it's something that helped me. And that is looking back at something like Bloom's taxonomy and looking at the order of thinking skills. And I actually have started teaching that to the class at the beginning of class, especially in my higher level classes. Saying, I'm not looking for comprehension, for knowledge and comprehension, although that's part of it, but I'm really looking for the higher level. So you're taking this paper that you read and this lecture that you attended and your own ideas here because of, and you're putting them together, or you're breaking something apart, or so then in their reflections I'm asking for that too.
Yeah.
So I want to see how you've brought several things together, or how you've really blown one thing apart and analyzed it, and that's where the higher marks are going to be, versus just here's what I did, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like. So that's given me something to hang on to.
A point about to use, this is obviously a type of experiential learning, and to use service learning as an example, really fundamental in service learning theory is the reflective part, right? And I'm a great believer in reflective writing, and it's probably easier for me because I teach literature, right? And I don't have everything all kind of numbered out. But I often see brilliant insights in reflective writing, And I should study this, I should do a study, I should check it, there are studies that have been done. But I swear, sometimes the actual kind of quality in terms of grammar and sentence structure is good, particularly in the students who are the weakest in those areas, just a thought. Lynn?
Well, and I've had that same struggle, and I've been working on another paper about natural history field journals with a collaborator at Santa Cruz University who's an English professor and then one who's a primatologist. And one of the things that we've been addressing is rubrics for marking field journals. And so that got me into the literature a bit, and what it made me realize is if there's reflective writing, writing those, not just because I had always thought rubrics was just saying 4 points for this, 3 points for that, but trying to describe the difference in what would get a 3 versus a 4 versus a 5. I found that one of the most painful and most informative pieces of my own learning that I've done in several years, because it really taught me what I was expecting, and then that's something you can give the students, and that clearly articulates. So this might be, you have your broad category, synthesis or engagement or this, but this might be examples of way that would distinguish, and that's really helped me think about it. But that takes a concerted amount of time beforehand, and having seen journals come in, or natural history field journals come in, and sort of getting a sense of what the possibilities are. So those kind of really well-established rubrics have been really helpful for me to think about it. And I think you do it kind of off the cuff anyways, but having to write it all out so that you can give it to the students in a meaningful way, it clarified that whole, no, right here. We talked about this. What does this mean?
And then when
Remember?
you're waffling as the marker, you've got that you can go back to as
Exactly.
well.
Yeah.
Or if I could just sort of add to that, because I've been in that territory too, and I've heard different language being used here, like Robin referred to depth, for example. Well, I express to students I want them to get beyond the superficial and to some substance, and then I'll give them some examples. So the superficial to me might be just a descriptive, just a clear description of what they observe, or a basic description of what they feel, and that's not good enough. And I'll give them an example of that, and I'll tell them I want to see in their writing and their reflection, or their whatever they've been assigned to get that the superficial into depth is even some challenging language of whether they're actually interpreting this right themselves a little bit. They're ongoing questioning, and there is no sort of right, but this is what I think is happening, that kind of thing. So continually questioning themselves and what they're reading and what they're connecting it to, as if there's no ultimate conclusion. It's something that they're continually working on, that they're continually thinking about. And when it comes to grading those kinds of things, I can't handle, okay, I'm looking for this and this, and I've got all these points for these things. I basically come from a perspective of, okay, I believe I know what I'm looking for, and I'll sense it when I read it, that this person has been really thinking about this and has reflected on this. And then when I don't see it all there, I don't feel it all, I'll make a comment of, well, this seems to be missing here for me, and then I'll take a few points off and say, well, this is good, but it's not excellent, right? And that's sort of how I think of that.
Maybe starting with a grade of 10.
Yeah.
Everybody starts with 10, and then, taking some points away even, might be a strategy.
We tried a rubric with our class and it increased, and it was that whole process of what am I, and you end up teaching students by telling them how they're going to be evaluated, almost, because initially we would just get little diaries. We did this, and then we did this, I like this. And
I would tell them myself, this is very subjective to me, and I want you to trust my professional judgment.
Yes.
Versus me trying to come up with the exact sort of little points of, well, where did I lose a point for this and this? I say, well, here's in essence, here's my verbal description of how you could improve this, or where I think you
That's
could
more
improve it.
my approach to probably not surprising. And
The other thing, that I find challenging is I have a couple of classes that I teach where some students come in with a lot of prior knowledge and other students come in with very
Yes.
little. And then they're doing the same or similar assignments. And so one of the things I ask them to tell me is, here's what I knew already coming in, and it could be nothing. I knew nothing, or I knew a fair bit, and here's the growth that took place as a result of doing this, and and giving them the opportunity to articulate how they grew themselves has helped me in that.
I'm looking forward to that, actually, out of those questions. How did you feel about group work before you did this, and went through this process? How do you feel about group work now? I mean, some of them might say the same, I hate it, but that's okay. Yeah.
But, then for how do you grade, I hate it. I mean,
Well, hopefully I get more than
because,
that. Exactly. Hopefully I get more than that, yeah, definitely.
Maybe for the teaching practices colloquium, we could do something about reflection on experiential learning and just so that as a group, because I think it's a big area, is if you want to integrate more experiential learning, it's how do you evaluate experience and communication of that experience.
Yeah, that would be great.
And it occurs to me, and obviously I'm biased, but that reflective writing maybe has a greater importance than ever, because, this is a broad generalization, but students have less time to think about, about what they're learning, and reflective writing, I don't know, gives them a chance to do that, right?
Yeah.
Now, Felicia, can I bother you for your impression? We have a student, of course, in the room, and your responses to the idea of reflective writing, or to Robin's assignment as a whole.
In reference to reflective writing, I don't do a lot of it. I'm a business student, so we don't have those kind of assignments. But I think that's a great idea. There are a lot of classes where I go through, and when I'm finished, I don't really know what I learned. Like, I might have gotten A, but I don't know, I can't quantify what I've learned, or I don't know what I'm taking away from it. So it would be really interesting to have something and maybe remind myself, oh, this is what I learned last year. It would be nice. Yeah.
Thanks. I have a question. And I think I need a bit of review, Robin. You said that you increased the weight of the assignment considerably, I believe, in the second year round. Did you want to talk a little bit about why you did that?
Because the first year was a total, well, it was an experiment to see whether it would actually work. And then I wanted to keep that piece in there. And then when Kyra and I were talking about when she was going to come into the classroom and all of those things, I felt like there was an opportunity to engage the students in another aspect of the assignment and give them even more control over the grade. But, and like I gave them, they were participating in their group formations, but not completely, but allowing them to feel like they were empowered somewhat in selecting the group, but also they're empowered as well in what that 50% is going to look like, for at least 10% of it. So that's why I did that. Now, whether that's has been a good decision or not, I won't know until the end. But they're very keen and they're very engaged in this, from what I can read in the classroom. They've asked, well, can we invite guests to the classroom? And so it feels to me like they're really engaged in this one. And I decided, okay, I'm going to make beforehand, this is more, because I want the process to come through, and I didn't have the process in last year. I didn't do the process at all. I just did, okay, what's your final product? So yeah.
Will you please be encouraging a few of them to submit to the undergraduate conference? That would give them a larger audience, and then invite some of their community partners maybe to join in that experience too.
Wouldn't that
Sounds
be
like a perfect
fascinating
fit.
for their fellow students? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. I hadn't even thought of that.
To share that this is research too, what they're learning. This is, yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's a really cool idea.
We'll get someone into your classroom to talk about it.
Yeah, thanks for that
Might have to-
reminder. It's probably a timely reminder for all of us, that we have both PHP.
Yeah, actually today's the unofficial deadline, or I guess the suggested deadline for the PhD proposal. So remind your classes if they have papers in philosophy, history, or politics that they're encouraged to submit their proposal by today, but there's still, I guess, some time. If they can't make today's deadline.
And I gather from talking to students in that wonderful student-run conference that they're liberal in their definitions of philosophy, history, and
Oh, yeah,
political studies. In other
definitely.
words, it could be a tourism paper with a
Oh.
historical bent or.
Yeah, lots of tourism papers would fit.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth makes a very good point about how this all fits into our larger university. The fact that we're looking at research in abroad, not in Europe.
Yeah.
Robin, I keep thinking back to those Chinese students. Trying to reflect in another language is so hard. Would you let them write it in Chinese and get it translated? Because they're
Sure.
really, communication in another language is.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it just going on that, it's a little bit of an aside. This year, my class format changed because of new scheduling, and I have 1 hour blocks 3 times a week. And I'm finding it really challenging. I mean, how do you discuss the concepts of authenticity in 50 minutes? Okay, you guys, And so what I did is, and then I thought, well, how am I going to test them in 50 minutes on a midterm? So for the first time this year, what I did is I split the midterm into a Wednesday and a Friday. And I gave them half the readings will be on the Wednesday class and half the readings will be on the Friday class. The formats will be different, like true, false, multiple choice, and short answer will be on the Wednesday, and then more reflective essay pieces will be, not reflective, but more of the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy will be on the Friday's class. And I did that specifically because of the international students. Because they need time to digest. I mean, here it is, we give them something in English, and then in their brains, they're going through it in another language, and then they've got to spit it out back in English again. And that's exactly the reason why I did that. I could kick myself because of the amount of marking. It was a crazy amount of marking to do it that way.
Right.
But I've noted that they got good grades.
It's a challenge, all I did was make my midterm a lot shorter and fit it into the 50 minutes. But yeah, it was challenging because I was used to having a 2-hour block.
Yeah.
Right? So I always had 2-hour midterms, which, most of them would finish well within that. But,
Right.
So yeah, I just made a really short midterm.
Well, one of the students said to me, "Can you do that?" And I went, "Yeah, I just did." So, I mean, that was
I thought of doing that, having a 2-day midterm.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, well, I know the grades were much higher than what they've been on previous midterms.
So did the students know what questions would be asked on Friday?
Nope, but they knew which readings they would come from.
Right, okay.
So these authors, this TED Talk by Wade Davis or whoever it was, will be on this, and these are what I'm looking for. I'm looking for questions where I take the theory from one reading, and I'm going to get you to discuss how it parallels or compares or whatever to the other readings. So they knew that that's the headset that they needed to be in, and it seemed to actually work. But that goes back to your question, about allowing them to express themselves in their native tongue.
Yeah, because you're trying to get them to reflect, not just write English.
Yeah.
It's a course on reflection, and that should be in any language.
Mm-hmm.
And our problem is most of us only speak English and understand English.
Yeah. I haven't put that out there this year.
That would be a university. That really rocks the university. Ottawa U, it's okay with French and English, and McGill, accepts students who write. I think they write their papers. They can write their papers in French, but for true internationalization.
I think this is totally off topic, but I think that's such an interesting discussion because we have a fairly high percentage of
Yeah, you guys
international
have a
students.
lot.
And
Yeah.
in the classes I teach, I have quite a high percentage, and I've gone back and forth between that, and I had a discussion with a colleague who's at a different university who said they sort of had a university-wide discussion about language, and that they decided it's an English language credential they're giving, and they're sending students out into the world with an English language credential saying they can work and operate in English. That's basically what this university has decided their degree means.
Right.
They can work and operate in English. So then if you have opportunities, but I think you're right, you know, particularly when you're looking for reflection, that's a whole different, it's a whole different way for your brain to work.
Yeah.
So I think that I'd love to have that discussion.
Yes, this is wonderful,
For an hour
right?
another
Reflective
time.
writing and that Rock University discussion. Please join me in thanking Robin for.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, I really appreciate it. And then I know that you're not on campus all the time, so thanks for joining us. We really have